Hey everyone, welcome to our next video about macromolecules. So remember, macromolecules are giant molecules made of carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, and sulfur, and that carbon is the most important one. And when we talk about our macromolecules, we talk about their function, so what they do, and then we talk about their monomers, which are the small parts that make up their polymers, which are where you have a bunch of monomers combined. So this time we're going to talk about nucleic acids, and those are things like DNA and RNA, which you might have remembered from middle school, like seventh grade or something. So, what do? Why do we care so much about nucleic acids? Well, they do two main things. DNA stores and transmits your hereditary or genetic information. So, your genes are contained within the nucleic acid DNA. Your RNA or ribonucleic acid is going to have a different function, and that is to control cell activities by directing protein synthesis. And what that means is they help your cells make proteins. And if you remember back really far to middle school, you can remember proteins are made in the ribosomes. And so RNA is actually going to be able to travel from the nucleus where it gets made all the way to the ribosomes and direct protein synthesis or direct proteins being made. Here's kind of fun fact. The nucleic acids are made of all of the elements that make up our macromolecules except for sulfur. So there's not sulfur in nucleic acids, but there is hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, carbon, and phosphorus. The monomer of nucleic acids are what we call nucleotides. And nucleotides have three little parts. So you can see there's a carbon sugar, a 5-carbon sugar. And that, if you were to take that all by itself, you could consider it to be a carbohydrate. But when it's binded together with a phosphate group, which has phosphorus, and a nitrogenous or nitrogen base, then those three pieces together make up the monomer of nucleic acids that is called a nucleotide. So nucleotides are a 5-carbon sugar with a phosphate group and a nitrogen base. There are several different types of these nucleic acid monomers. There's actually 5 that we talk about for this class, and they are adenine or A, thymine, T, guanine, G, and cytosine, C. So you might remember from DNA, A goes with T, G goes with C. And then the last one is called uracil, and uracil is part of RNA, which will, again, help us make our proteins. So if you're looking at nucleic acid monomers, we're talking about this molecule right here that has sugar, phosphate, and nitrogen base, and there are 5 different combinations of that. Now, those monomers get together to form these really, really big and super important polymers called DNA and RNA. So, DNA or deoxyribonucleic acid is in your nucleus. And like I said, A goes with T and G goes with C there. Your RNA or ribonucleic acid is used to make your proteins. And in RNA, there's no thymine, there's no T. So in RNA, it's A goes with U and G goes with C. And we'll talk about those two topics a little bit more later on in the year. But here's just kind of a picture representation. So RNA is only actually one strand, and DNA is a double helix, so actually 2 twisted strands. But you can see here how the monomers bond together to each other when they're making a DNA or RNA. This one's actually an RNA. We can tell because it has U for uracil. And you can see where the phosphate group bonds to the sugar. And then that will bond to another phosphate group and bond to another sugar and bond to another phosphate group and bond to another sugar and then a phosphate group, making a big long chain. And the nitrogen bases would be kind of in the middle of that chain. So these colorful little tabs here on these structures, those are the nitrogen bases that you can see there. So like I said, the monomers, which are nucleotides, they'll bond together to make the polymers or nucleic acids. Thanks so much for listening.